When the daughter-in-law announced at dinner that she was pregnant, a deadly silence fell over the room. Even the television, which had been buzzing in the background, seemed to stop. Linda, her mother-in-law, froze with a spoon in her hand. The head of the family, James Patterson, looked up from his newspaper, and the daughter-in-law's husband, Michael, choked on a piece of fish. "What?" Linda asked, although she heard perfectly well. The pregnant woman, Jessica, repeated with a smile, running her hand over her flat stomach. She could barely contain her laughter, looking at the expressions on the gathered faces. "Oh, my dear," Linda gasped, bringing her hands to her face. "Lord, thank you. Just wait, nothing has happened yet." James Patterson set the newspaper aside, eyeing Jessica with skepticism. "Are you sure?" "Sure." Jessica raised her eyebrows, lifting her chin slightly. From that evening on, her whole life was turned upside down. Just 3 days later, Jessica, who was used to jogging in Central Park in New York every morning, was forced to listen to her mother-in-law's lessons. She barely managed to leave the house when a loud shout echoed from behind her. "Jess, where do you think you're going?" Linda ran out after her, managing to throw on only a flannel robe. "For a run," Jessica said calmly. "What run?" Linda nearly choked. "You're pregnant. What kind of running? Do you understand that it's dangerous?" "Oh, stop it," Jessica sighed tiredly. "It's even healthy." "Healthy?" Linda placed her hands on her hips. "For whom? For your fitness? You don't understand that you need to take care of yourself now. I understand you want to help, but I've played sports my whole life. I'm actually a fitness trainer, if you didn't know. Trust me, I know what kind of load a woman's body can handle during pregnancy. I'm not going to become a delicate vase just because you decided so." Linda looked at her as if she were a child insisting on sticking a finger into an electrical socket. "You'll see," she said, pursing her lips. "In a week, you'll understand how silly this all is. No more jogging." But Jessica wasn't going to give up and simply ran away from her mother-in-law. And at the dinner table, another argument broke out. "Why didn't you tell me?" Michael frowned, poking his fork into his plate. "We could have discussed everything." "Discuss?" Jessica narrowed her eyes. "What is there to discuss? I know my body better than anyone." "You know your body," Linda interjected, "but you don't know how it will affect the baby." "Enough." James Patterson raised a hand. "You argue as if you have any say in this." Jessica merely shook her head silently. She knew one thing. The upcoming 9 months would be a real quest, and it began now, with family oversight that more resembled exhausting mentoring. The house greeted Jessica with deadly silence. Only the clock in the corridor ticked rhythmically, marking time until the next conflict. Exhausted after a gym workout, she only dreamed of a hot shower and a moment of peace. Removing her jacket, she hung it on a hook and automatically reached for the shelf where the car keys usually lay. The shelf was empty. Jessica frowned. Her habit of placing things in their proper places was almost automatic. She scanned the entryway, then checked the jacket pockets. Empty. "Damn," she muttered to herself, trying to remember where she could have put the keys. She searched her handbag, the console, and even looked in the closet, knowing it was foolish. No keys. Her heart began to beat a bit faster. Could she have lost them? At that moment, the door quietly creaked open, and Linda entered the house. "Jessica, you're home already?" The mother-in-law smiled as if nothing had happened. Jessica turned to her sharply. Did you see my car keys by any chance? Linda, without taking off her coat, nodded and walked past, heading to the kitchen. Of course I saw them, she replied calmly. And where are they? Jessica followed her, trying to keep her voice steady. Linda turned on the kettle, took a cup from the cupboard, and only then answered. Catherine has them. She said it calmly, as if it was the most natural thing. Catherine, Linda called her own daughter. She borrowed your car for a few days. Borrowed? Jessica felt anger boiling inside her. And who allowed her? Michael and I agreed, Linda shrugged. And no one bothered to ask me? Jess, why are you so upset? Linda shrugged. You shouldn't be driving now. It's dangerous. Catherine needs it more for an important business trip. Business trip? Jessica couldn't believe her ears. I'll take you where you need to go. Linda smiled as if that solved all problems. You really need to rest more now, not drive around. Jessica stared at her, feeling the anger overflow. Linda, I know you want to help, but I don't think that decision was right. I'd prefer to be asked. Linda looked at her with reproach, but Jessica didn't relent. Listen, either Catherine returns my keys immediately, or I'll call the police. Linda opened her mouth to say something, but couldn't find the words. Jessica turned and left the kitchen, slamming the door to her room. She felt as if her once free and active life was turning into a cage, and the most annoying part was that others held the keys to it. The sound of Jessica's heels echoed through the corridor. Her breathing was heavy, eyes darting, while her hands nervously fumbled with her phone. Linda, sitting in a kitchen chair, stirred her tea calmingly, as if nothing was happening. Linda! Jessica stormed into the kitchen, her voice trembling with fury. What happened this time? The mother-in-law raised her gaze, but immediately tensed, noticing the whitened knuckles of her daughter-in-law, who gripped her phone tightly. The keys to my car. Now. Jessica, we already discussed this, Linda began. You're in such a state. What state? Jessica stepped closer. Her eyes were practically shooting sparks. In a state of fury. You're right. And you know why? Because you and your Catherine decided you could control my life. Don't yell. Linda withdrew slightly against the back of the chair. It's bad for the baby. It's worse for the baby if his mother goes crazy from surprises like these. Jessica narrowed her eyes. Give me my keys back immediately. I don't have them, Linda shrugged. Catherine does. Then Catherine should return them to me. Today. I'll tell her, but I'm not sure she'll make it over. She's got a lot to do. Linda looked at her daughter-in-law reproachfully. Jessica, you're making a problem out of nothing. Can't you see that? Jessica sighed, turned sharply, and left the kitchen, slamming her bedroom door. She felt that her life, once free and active, was becoming a cage. And the most annoying thing, the keys to that cage were with others. Jessica's heels echoed through the hallway. Her breathing was heavy, her gaze was flitting, and her hands nervously fumbled with her phone. Linda sat in the kitchen, tapping her fingers nervously on the countertop. The phone lay nearby, and she hesitated to press the call button, but after a minute, she reached for the device and dialed her son's number. Hello, Michael? Her voice trembled with tension. Mom, what's wrong? He replied, a note of concern in his voice. Jessica. She's behaving terribly. Linda's voice nearly broke. She even mentioned divorce. Yes, I heard. She threatened me too, Michael replied. We need to do something about this. She yelled at me so much, I almost hit the wall. Jessica was at home, her gaze fixed on her phone. She heard the sound of the door opening. Her heart skipped a beat, but she didn't show it.
"Jessica!"
Michael called from the doorway. She didn't even turn her head, continuing to scroll through the screen.
"What is this circus?"
he asked as he entered the room.
"Circus?"
She slowly raised her gaze, her eyes flashing. "You know, Michael, a circus is when your family decides for me how I should live."
"Mom says you yelled at her."
He stood before his wife, arms folded across his chest.
"Yelled?"
Jessica rose from the couch, the blanket falling to the floor. "Michael, do you seriously think I should smile when I find out that my car, mind you, suddenly ended up in your sister's hands? We just wanted, She squinted. "Do you realize 'we' is an inappropriate pronoun in this situation? There's me, your wife, who happens to be a person too, not an add-on to your mother." Michael tried to argue, but Jessica interrupted him. "Do you understand how humiliating this is? Why did no one ask me?"
"We thought it would be better for you,"
he finally said, trying to speak calmly.
"For me?"
Her voice broke into a shout.
"Do you hear yourself? It would be better for me if you stayed out of my life."
"Jessica, you're blowing this out of proportion."
"Blowing it out of proportion?"
She shot him a glance, her face ablaze. "You all just like making decisions for me. Come on, it's just a car." "It's not just a car." Jessica stepped towards him. Her face was literally on fire. "It's my right to choose." Michael raised his hands in a gesture of peace.
"Okay, I get it. I'll tell Mom that she—"
"You'll tell Mom?" she interrupted, clenching her fists. "Why didn't you tell her that right away? Why did you let her even arrange this?"
"Jessica, I didn't think it would affect you so much."
He rubbed the back of his neck.
"That's the problem, Michael," she said coldly.
"You don't think or see how I feel." This time he said nothing, casting his eyes downward. "If all this doesn't stop," she exhaled, "I will truly leave. And don't think I'm joking or bluffing." Her husband looked at her, clearly understanding that the situation was now serious. After that memorable evening, the house grew quiet. Linda no longer dared to meddle in her daughter-in-law's affairs, and her daughter Catherine avoided her brother's house altogether, as if fearing even accidentally running into Jessica. Michael changed as well. He tried to be more attentive, although the awkwardness in his behavior irritated Jessica at first. Several months passed. Jessica organized a workout for her clients outdoors. The women laughed and admired her energy.
"Jessica, you're such a hero,"
one of them said. "When I was in your position, I just lay on the couch eating ice cream." "I can't sit idle," Jessica replied. "Movement is life." She felt invigorated every day, looking back over the past months. She knew for certain she had put everyone in their place. Now no one would dare decide for her how she should live. When Michael returned home from work that evening as usual, Jessica greeted him with a warm smile.
"How are you?"
he asked, carefully wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Great," she answered honestly. "I've got everything under control." And indeed, she did.